But first, and talking about stupid, this election campaign, it's an insult to your intelligence. I mean, who would have thought that the biggest election issue for the past week is just how nice Australia should be to the Solomon Islands? A string of islands, 2,000 kilometres off Queensland, that almost no Australian will ever see. Now, I know that the issue is actually more complicated and important, much more important. China's signed a security deal with the Solomons, and it lets China's Navy resupply there. And that could be the start of a Chinese military base within missile range of Australia. So that is a big worry. But America couldn't stop this China deal. New Zealand couldn't stop it. The Morrison Government sure couldn't stop it. In fact, I doubt this deal is even wanted with most Solomon Islanders, because many are already so anti-Chinese that mobs last November burned down Chinatown in the country's capital. So let me just stick to the facts before I show you the insane politics around this. Fact, China's growing very powerful, very aggressive, very fast, building naval ports or seeking them all around Australia. Fact, we're too small to do much to stop any of this. Fact, China got this deal almost certainly because of bribes. You see, we actually do give a lot more aid to the Solomons than every other country combined. But China plays dirty. It puts its money into the pockets of politicians there. We don't. And that money talks. And I've got to admit, right, call this another fact, the Morrison government could have done more. It's true. The Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, never went to the Solomons to head this off. She's one of the passengers in this Morrison government. But even if she had gone, I mean, really, seriously, if she'd gone to the Solomons and said, here's even more aid, you think that would have made any difference? For heaven's sake, we saved the Solomons Prime Minister last December by sending our soldiers and the Australian Federal Police to save him from the riots. And even that didn't stop the ungrateful so-and-so from signing this deal with China. But let's now talk about the politics, the dumb politics. It gives you a really sad insight into this election campaign. For instance, just today, the very bitter and twisted ex-Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, when are they going to throw this guy out of the party, phoned in from New York to try to wreck yet another Liberal election campaign, this time by attacking the two men, again, that he blames most for kicking him out as leader, Scott Morrison and Peter Dutton.
It's not a question of stopping the deal. You've got to... this sort of bully boy language is really unhelpful. It may actually be part of the problem. And this is the approach that I took. I headed off these Chinese projects. This is a hose you have to hold, put it bluntly. This needs time and attention. You cannot abdicate or step away from responsibility.
And on he went. Dutton was a fool and Morrison was asleep at the wheel and should be holding the hose. I wouldn't take a word of advice from Malcolm Turnbull in standing up to China. I mean, this is the bloke that when he was Prime Minister, he allowed the port of Darwin to be leased to China for 99 years. Not in the Solomon Islands, in Darwin. And Turnbull also tried to ratify a treaty to have us extradite wanted people to the Chinese dictatorship until his own party rebelled. But look, this election campaign of Labor, look, I've got to say, it's not much better. And it's all based on so much hyperbole, because only just last August, right? Only last August, Labor's own defence deputy leader, Richard Marles, who's tipped to be the next defence minister, actually admitted, before all this blew up into an election issue, that actually Australia was pulling its weight in the Pacific. He wrote that it would be wrong to suggest that Australia has not properly allocated resources to its relationship with the Pacific. Because every year, he said, this Labor man, we give more than $1 billion of development assistance to the Pacific. And Australia accounts for 45% of the total aid given to the region. China and the United States, just 8% each. That's right. Labor itself admits we pay nearly half the aid that the whole world gives to the Pacific Islands. Just us. But now let's play politics about this. Now Labor is saying, well, this China deal is a disaster caused by the Morrison government. because it didn't give enough aid, didn't pay enough attention. Here's Labor leader Anthony Albanese phoning in from 2GB from COVID isolation to say he'd stop China by doing it all different.
We'll do what's necessary to stop it. And one of the ways that we'll do that is through our announcement today with our Stronger Pacific policy, a comprehensive plan to engage with our neighbours in the Pacific, to engage with development assessment.
But we're already doing that, according to Richard Marles in August last year.
No, that's not right. That's
what
right,
he said.
Ray.
He said that
Ray,
last year.
Ray, I know that our opponents can dig out sentences, out of context.
Oh, how shocking to drag up a quote that Labor's deputy leader actually wrote in a book just last August. I mean, really, next we'll be holding against him something he said yesterday. How could we do something so terrible? I mean, seriously. Okay, so what would Labor do differently? Well, you'd cry under this new policy today. You'd cry. Number one, it would do more about global warming.
Pacific Island leaders have made absolutely clear that their number one national security and economic challenge is climate change.
Okay, so what are we going to do to please them? I mean, close our coal mines maybe? Really? And remember, global warming isn't actually drowning Pacific Islands like you're told. I mean, this is a cash cow issue for the Pacific Islands. Nearly half the atoll islands studied in Auckland University research, the best in the world, they're actually growing. Half of them. Another 43% is stable. And if the Solomon Islands government really is so upset about our global warming policies, why is it signing a deal instead with China that's not just the world's biggest emitter by far, but last week announced it's actually going to dig out even more coal? But Labor today, another bit of this new policy, it's promised to train soldiers in Pacific Islands, to build military ties.
We know the first priority of government is to secure the nation. And this means we have to secure our region. We have to build a stronger Pacific family.
But hold on again. We already do train Pacific forces. Here are our soldiers 3 years ago, training Tongan soldiers. Last year, they trained Fijians. We also train with PNG. And we've given patrol boats to Pacific Islands. We train their professionals in a college in Canberra. So, Labor's policy is actually to do exactly what is done already, except maybe a little more. And they said today, spend another $130 million a year. That might be good, but would more of the same really have stopped China making this deal with the Solomon Islands? Would it stop the next deal? Oh, wait, sorry, I'm being unfair. There was one more policy that Labor announced today to stop China dead in its tracks. Broadcast the ABC to the Pacific.
Unlike Mr Morrison, Labor wants Australian voices in the Pacific, not the voices of the Chinese Communist Party. Labor wants Australian voices broadcast in the Pacific, not voices of the Chinese Communist Party.
Seriously, the ABC is going to save us? The Prime Minister called it a joke.
What they're effectively saying is they're going to keep doing what we've been doing. There's one difference, though. I sent in the AFP. The Labor Party wants to send in the ABC when it comes to their Pacific solution. They have a Q&A solution in the Pacific. What we have is real investment in our partnerships with the region.
Now look, using our soft power, our cultural power by broadcasting to the Pacific, look, it sounds like a good idea, except when you think the ABC would do that. I mean, the ABC that, stoke up the global warming paranoia, that paint Australia as racist and genocidal, that play race politics, belt America. How's that? A diet of that going to help us stop China in the Pacific? So see what I mean here? I mean, all this sound and furious, pathetic politics, avoiding the real issues, the big, hard issues, does not get us anywhere to what is really happening here. China starting to dominate the world, bribing its way into Africa, now bribing its way into the Pacific, and us just babbling about global warming. We will better slash our own emissions even harder, make ourselves weaker. or maybe we should send over a few extra $1 million in aid. It's not going to change any of that. None.